Any views expressed in this film are those of the artists, recorded as part of the Future is Loading exhibition.
Hi, I'm Rudy Loewe. I'm a visual artist and artist educator. My pronouns are they, them. I work with different kinds of topics like Black history, colonialism, gender, sexuality, and how these themes can be looked at through painting, drawing, and printmaking. I am a light-skinned Black mixed-race person with two long braids, glasses, a nose ring, uh, a cowrie shell necklace, and a little beanie hat.
Hi, my name's Tobi, pronouns they, them. I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I work mostly with mediums around visual, in terms of like video and sound, in terms of poetry and singing, kind of incorporating harmonies into my work. A lot of my topics and themes revolve around healing, ancestral language, and just coming back to nature. So my image description, I am a dark-skinned Black femme with gold hair and a little tuft of a lock growing on the left side of my head. I'm wearing an abalone shell necklace. I have one earring in my right ear and two nose piercings, one in my septum and one in my actual nose, which is a circular ring, a spiral ring.
And you have beautiful lipstick.
Yes, a beautiful purple lipstick. Thanks, Rudy.
We're having this conversation today alongside the Shape Arts exhibition, The Future is Loading, really just to talk about disability justice, you know, in this time of COVID-19 and the global pandemic.
Yeah, it's definitely a necessary conversation. I think Rudy and I have always had lots of different chats about just living as disabled people, experiencing a different version of the pandemic than, you know, people who are able-bodied. So it's great that we're getting to have this chat archived.
So our first topic of discussion was shielding. And I'm not shielding, but Toby, you are. So maybe you would just like to say a bit about your experiences of that.
It's been quite, I mean, since the lockdown started, I think I have a little one, just to say I have a 6-year-old. We're both high risk, we're both immunocompromised, and I have a background in biomedical science. So when this whole pandemic was starting, I had already pulled my little one out of school like 2 weeks before the government officially announced the lockdown. And that just kind of further brought us into the reality of what living like in isolation as disabled people looks like. It's been great to have, you know, members of family and really close friends who are supporting, going to get our meds, bringing food and things like this. But ultimately, I think as a wider community, as a wider society, there's so many more conversations that this has brought up, you know. Yeah, I feel still, you know, in a lot of ways quite privileged that I have access to other people to support me, but I know a lot of disabled people in my networks who don't, who are just at home, who are, you know, relying on the mercy of this government to look after them, and that's not really happening. So it's just quite an unfortunate time, and outside of mutual aid, I don't even know how people are surviving right now.
Yeah, and I guess also like thinking about how now with the kind of easing of the lockdown, as they keep saying, like what this means for people who are shielding, and you know, the responsibility for the rest of us who aren't shielding as well.
Yeah, it's it feels like, you know, once the government announced that this shielding or this lockdown is going to happen, all of a sudden everybody just is having this very intense amnesia about what it means like to be living inside of a pandemic. Like that hasn't ended. We're still inside it. People are forgetting, you know, not even forgetting. I think I would say there's a willful ignorance and a willful like lack of care in people like going out and wearing masks, washing hands, trying to keep social distancing rules. And I know that the current guidelines aren't helping because people don't feel like there's anything to hold them to account. So they're doing what they want, but not thinking about the fact that they're weaponizing their bodies by not considering that some disabled people now don't have a choice but to go out, but to not adhere to shielding because they can't. And I don't know how. We have to start reminding each other of this, and like, you know, and really infusing the need, the necessity for care in this conversation and in our actions. But that's definitely urgent.
Absolutely. I feel like, yeah, you said it, like, there's not a feeling of collective care in terms of, like, even if you're not shielding, how do the things that we're doing impact people who are shielding? You know, if you're going to the pub and, like, you know, you're exposing yourself to like 50, 100 more people than you would have otherwise, like, how is that going to then have an effect on someone else who's more high risk and vulnerable?
Exactly.
And I know, like, a lot of people have also been talking about the fact that even before the lockdown, there were people who were isolated already, who were already staying at home, you know, so it hasn't made that much of a change for them. But yeah, it's kind of frustrating to feel like the conversation around the pandemic, at least in the UK, I don't feel like has really focused very much on people who are shielding or who are more vulnerable.
That is such a good point about, you know, a lot of people who have just been at home, a lot of disabled people who just haven't really had to change anything because they are isolated as a result of, you know, varying disabilities. And I know that this might not feel like it has like a far-reaching effect, especially on people who are already in isolation, but it just feels like the right time to be, or in fact, the only time that we've been able to actively engage in this part of the conversation and engage with the reality of the fact that if not for disabled people, we wouldn't be able to figure out mutual aid in the ways that we are now. We wouldn't be able to get so quick to thinking about what shielding looks like for other vulnerable people. And so it's just tough to see that even with that being a part of our conversations, nothing is changing. There is no real active language of care that's being imbued in all of us as a society. That means that, you know, equity is just part of the conversation. We're going back into this like willful amnesia that means people are just like, yeah, it's back to normal now. We're going back to how it was before. But the pandemic is still not over. We're still in it.
Yeah, I feel like that's really that's a big thing as well, that, you know, there's so many you know, different things that people could have implemented like before the pandemic, that people always made excuses. No, we can't, like, we can't do like a webinar, we can't screen this, like, we can't do that. There's so many things that were suddenly able to be implemented during the lockdown, and now that the lockdown is being eased, people want to go back to how it was before, you know. So I also feel like, you know, there's organizations who I work with who it's like, oh, okay, well, we could meet in person. I'm like, no, why would we do that? Like, we're not there yet, you know. And so it's frustrating that even those changes that people were able to put in place, people want to go back already and just forget all the work that's been done.
It's also like, why are we going back? Because thinking about it, a lot of the conversations that I've seen, even from able-bodied people who are existing under capitalism, as we all are, is, whoa, like, this is the first time I've really been able to take some time for myself and rest. And this is the first time I've been able to actually sit with what it is I need to make my work happen. And a lot of it doesn't require me to be going outside. Like, you know, if we're thinking about the climate, like a lot of like pollution, emissions, everything went so far down when we weren't just consistently trying to produce and reproduce. So for people to be then forgetting that actually universities were having lectures online, people were taking exams from their bedrooms, children are being taught over Zoom, over lots of different platforms, and it wasn't really affecting the quality of the work or the ways in which it was, you know, it was being delivered. So why is that not first even, okay, let this be an option, as opposed to, no, let's just forget that that's even a thing and go back to how we were before? It makes no sense. And it's also just, yeah, frustrating to see that, and also a little bit gaslighting of the whole of the whole world, to not acknowledge that this is a possibility. Like, we could be creating new futures, we could be making all these like more accessible pathways that mean everybody understands that language, regardless of whether or not you have a disability.
I think this leads on really well to our next topic, which was thinking about a disability justice shaped future. And yeah.
You can watch more of Tobi and Rudy's conversation and view the Future is Loading exhibition on our website at www.shapearts.org.uk.